the supreme leader. For 36 years, he ruled a nation of 90 million people from a compound so fortified, so buried beneath the earth, that the elevator alone took more than 5 minutes to reach it. He had survived a bomb that tore apart his right arm and left it paralyzed for the rest of his life. He had survived wars that razed his borders. He had survived revolutions that tried to unseat everything he built. Sanctions that tried to starve his country into submission. Assassination plots that never made it past his walls. He was 86 years old. He was rarely seen in public, and he genuinely believed, that no enemy could reach him. He was wrong. The man they couldn't kill, Ali Khamenei, did not rise to power because he was the most respected cleric in Iran. He wasn't. He rose because when the Islamic Republic needed someone loyal, calculating, and willing to make decisions that others flinched at, he was there. In 1981, a bomb detonated during a speech he was giving inside a Tehran mosque. The blast shattered his right arm. Surgeons could not save its function. He spent weeks recovering and then went straight back to work. 8 years later, when Iran's founding supreme leader died, the question wasn't who was the most powerful man in the room. It was who could be trusted to hold the republic together without threatening the people already in power. Khamenei was handpicked, not despite his limitations, but because of them. What followed was 3.5 decades of absolute control above the president, above the judiciary, above every general in the Iranian military. He controlled the nuclear program, the Revolutionary Guard, and every decision that shaped the Islamic Republic's direction. When protests erupted, and they did repeatedly, his security forces crushed them. Thousands were killed in the streets. He did not waver. By early 2026, he had retreated almost entirely from public view. His compound in central Tehran sat above a bunker so deep it was functionally unreachable. He had outlasted every threat, every enemy, every attempt to pressure or destabilize him. The intelligence agencies that had watched him for decades noted one thing above all else. Since a major military confrontation with Israel in mid-2025, Khamenei had become more paranoid, more isolated, and more unpredictable in his movements. Almost impossible to target. Almost. The window that changed everything on February 27th, 2026, nuclear negotiations between Iran and the United States collapsed in Oman. For weeks, diplomats had been working toward a deal. The American position was absolute. Iran must abandon uranium enrichment entirely. Khamenei refused. The talks ended. Within 24 hours, the decision had been made. The bombs would fall. What made this moment different from every previous confrontation was not just the political breakdown. It was a single piece of intelligence that American and Israeli agencies had been developing for months. A meeting of senior Iranian officials had been scheduled for the morning of February 28th at Khamenei's compound, with Khamenei present. That intelligence changed the timeline of everything. A senior defense official would later say, the decision was made to accelerate the strike and take the target of opportunity. The window was real, the window was narrow, and the window was used. The morning, the city woke up to war. It was a Saturday in Tehran, the first day of the Iranian work and school week. The city was stirring, commuters were moving, children were arriving at school. At 2:30 in the morning, U.S. Eastern Time, while most of America slept, the White House released a pre-recorded statement. It was already too late. The first missiles were in the air before the statement finished playing. What hit Tehran that morning was unlike anything the city had seen in modern times. Massive explosions tore through downtown during the morning rush. Black smoke climbed from the Ministry of Defense, from the presidential compound, from the walled complex where Khamenei lived and worked. Residents heard jets they couldn't see, missiles striking targets in every direction. Children ran from schools into the streets. Communications across the capital fell to less than half normal capacity as the government scrambled to cut access. On the Israeli side, it was the largest Air Force operation in the country's history. Approximately 200 fighter jets struck around 500 targets across Iran, missile launch sites, air defense systems, military airfields, and command infrastructure in a single coordinated wave. Cities across the country were hit simultaneously. American destroyers in the Persian Gulf and Mediterranean fired cruise missiles at Revolutionary Guard command centers and weapons production facilities. 7 confirmed strikes landed at the compound in central Tehran. Khamenei was at his desk when the missiles hit. Not in the bunker, not in transit. At his desk, carrying out his duties, according to Iranian state media. The buildings around him were leveled. His body was recovered from the rubble. Israeli intelligence confirmed the identification. He was not the only one killed that morning. The head of the IRGC ground forces, the defense minister, Khamenei's personal national security advisor, 4 senior intelligence commanders. Israeli officials stated they had simultaneously targeted 30 key leaders across 3 separate locations. American sources reported approximately 40 Iranian officials killed across all strikes combined. Members of Khamenei's own family were killed at the compound. The silence, then the confirmation. Iran's first response was denial. State media called Khamenei safe and sound. The foreign ministry insisted he was commanding operations from the field. For hours, the Islamic Republic tried to control the story. Then Israel's prime minister went on television. He said there were many signs the supreme leader was no longer with them. The American president posted on social media, Khamenei was dead. The following morning, Sunday in Iran, state television confirmed it. A broadcaster on live national television broke down in tears reading the announcement aloud. The supreme leader had been martyred at his workplace. 40 days of national mourning were declared, a week of public holidays. Funeral processions brought millions into the streets, crowds comparable to the mourning that followed the killing of Revolutionary Guard Commander Qasem Soleimani in 2020. A country and a world divided. The reaction that followed split almost instantly. In parts of Tehran, apartment windows opened and music poured out. People cheered from balconies. In Los Angeles, home to one of the world's largest Iranian diaspora communities, thousands gathered in the streets. For many Iranians who had watched the security forces open fire on protesters for years, there was no grief, but that was only part of the story. Across Iran, enormous crowds dressed in black filled the streets. Portraits were carried. The mourning was real. For millions, whatever their feelings about the man personally, this was a foreign strike on Iranian soil, and they showed up to say so. Iran's president called the killing a great crime and vowed retaliation. The Revolutionary Guard announced the launch of what it called the most intense offensive operation in Iranian military history. Waves of ballistic missiles and drones were fired at targets across the region. Jordan intercepted dozens of projectiles threatening its territory. Iran shut the Strait of Hormuz, through which around 20% of the world's oil supply passes, to all shipping traffic. 3 vessels were struck. The economic impact was immediate. Oil prices surged. Airlines halted flights across the Middle East. Stock markets in Europe and Asia opened sharply lower. Analysts warned that a prolonged closure of the strait could push energy prices to levels not seen in years. The irony at the end. Ali Khamenei survived a bomb in 1981 that permanently destroyed the function of his right arm. He survived wars, economic collapse, mass protests, and decades of enemies who could never find a way through his walls. In the end, it wasn't a spectacular covert operation that reached him. It wasn't a lucky strike or a last-minute tip. It was a meeting, a routine gathering of officials scheduled in advance at a location intelligence teams had spent months learning to read. his own habits, his own patterns, his own compound. The most fortified man in the Middle East was found not by breaking through his defenses, but by waiting for the one morning he had somewhere to be. If you want to see more stories like this, wars, turning points, the moments that changed everything, subscribe and drop your suggestions for the next video in the comments below.